Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Beggar's Frontier. A Tale of the Broken Canvas. The city of Orthny sat in a basin of cracked earth, a place where the sun beat down like a harsh judge. It was a settlement where men measured their worth by the size of their grain sacks and the height of their stone walls. If you were prosperous, the town judges declared that the Almighty favored your diligence. If you were destitute, they whispered that you were paying the secret debts of your ancestors. Every town has a resident monument to bad luck, and Orthny had a man named Jabez. His mother had nearly died bearing him, and in the bitter delirium of her labor, she named him the Hebrew word for pain. The name stuck to him like a burr to a frayed coat, prophesying a destiny of uninterrupted sorrow. Jabez walked with a slight limp, wore garments perpetually thinned at the elbows, and carried a quiet shadow that frightened the superstitious. The prosperous merchants in the public square would deliberately cross the street rather than let his shadow fall across their fine linens. They believed the cruel fatalism of a fallen world. They insisted that a man born in the dirt was destined to die in it. His own brothers were men of broad shoulders and deep pockets, fiercely proud of their unblemished reputations. They treated Jabez like a stray dog that had wandered into a royal banquet, tossing him scraps of pity while hoarding their respect. This is the terrible lie we tell ourselves, that grace is earned by those who manage to keep their own garments clean. But the crowd praises what is hollow, while heaven quietly measures what is holy. The great festival of the inheritance arrived on the appointed day, when the king's magistrate stood at the city gates to distribute the unmapped territories. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat, the sweat of ambitious men, and the nervous energy of impending wealth. The brothers of Jabez stepped forward first, their hands heavy with silver to prove their capability to the magistrate. They demanded the lush valleys of the interior, the well-watered plains, where the walls were already built, and the enemies were long gone. They received their safe, comfortable estates, and the crowd cheered for them, because the crowd always loves a winner who asks for easy things. Then the man named Pain stepped out of the shadows and approached the high seat. A ripple of cruel, anticipated laughter moved through the crowded marketplace. What could the ragged child of sorrow possibly demand from the royal inheritance? The onlookers assumed he would beg for a small pension, a quiet corner to hide his misery, or perhaps a daily bowl of lentil stew. They expected him to negotiate the terms of his own irrelevance. Jabez didn't bow his head in shame. He looked directly at the representative of the covenant king. "Oh, that you would bless me indeed," Jabez began, his voice cutting through the murmurs with surprising, militant force. The crowd scoffed, assuming this was the prelude to a greedy plea for unearned gold. "Expand my territory," he demanded, standing tall in his worn boots. The laughter erupted into open mocking, echoing off the baked clay walls of the gatehouse. The town fool, the walking tragedy, was suddenly asking for an empire. They thought he was infected with the carnal ambition of a madman who had finally snapped under the weight of his poverty, but they did not understand the profound misdirection of his audacious request. Jabez was not looking toward the safe, fertile valleys his brothers had just claimed. He raised his calloused hand and pointed toward the jagged, contested frontier on the horizon. He pointed to the dark mountains where the ancient enemies of the king still fortified their terrifying strongholds. He was not asking for a place to rest his weary head. He was asking for a theatre of war. He knew that the man born in the shadow of sorrow need not die there. If he cries out to the king who turns curses into crowns. He was refusing to accept his spiritual barrenness as a permanent, unbreakable condition. Jabez raised both his hands, and the sheer intensity of his posture silenced the jeering square. "Let your hand be with me," he pleaded, and here the tone of his prayer changed from a royal demand to a desperate, breathless cry. He understood the terrifying truth that comfortable men so easily and foolishly forget. To ask for the hand of God, without the heart of God, is to court one's own destruction. To be given vast borders and great success without the restraining, holy grip of the Almighty is a deadly, intoxicating poison. Jabez did not want an unchecked prosperity that would only magnify his inherent human ruin. He demanded the wildest freedom by begging for the heaviest chain of divine obedience. He wanted the king's heavy, guiding hand upon his neck, driving out his own pride as fiercely as he would drive out the mountain tribes. He was actively inviting the severe mercy of divine discipline. "And keep me from evil," Jabez concluded, his voice dropping to a raw whisper that somehow carried to the furthest edges of the crowd. "Keep me from pain, that I may not cause it any more." This was the heart of the matter, the great reversal of his very identity. He was asking the sovereign to reach into the agonizing grooves of his history and completely rewrite his name. The crowd fell completely silent, the mockery dying in their dry throats as the weight of his words settled over the dust. They had expected a beggar's whine, but they had just witnessed a warrior's solemn oath. He was offering to take the hardest ground, the bleeding edge of the kingdom, if only the king would walk beside him. The magistrate stared at the ragged man, recognizing the rare, unyielding faith that heaven consistently honors. He extended the royal scroll, and as his hand reached forward, the crowd could see the deep, ancient scar that cut across his palm, the mark of the covenant he had sealed on behalf of the king at great personal cost. A cursed beginning is merely the dark canvas upon which the sovereign redeems with his unrelenting grace. The royal decree was written, the heavy signet seal was pressed into the hot wax, and the contested mountains were legally given to the child of grief. Jabez did not march out of the city gates with a great army or a chest of stolen silver. He walked alone toward the jagged horizon. He cast the long, imposing shadow of a conqueror. God granted him exactly what he requested, completely obliterating the fatalism of his painful birth. The brothers kept their safe, predictable valleys, growing rich and fat and entirely irrelevant to the grand, sweeping story of the kingdom. But Jabez took the terrifying frontier, fighting the darkness with the undeniable presence of the Lord at his right hand. He bore the physical scars of his many battles, but they were the marks of honor, not the brands of a curse. He asked for a burden, and in return he received an eternal inheritance. The king had taken a broken man named Pain and transformed him into an unshakable fortress of peace. Selah.